good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on which one, where you are or when you are, whenever you watch this. We are about to do lesson 18, chapter 23 and 24. Now, I have the sheets for you whenever you can get up here to get them. They're in that black folder where it says lesson 18. If you want me to email it to you, I can do that too. So just email me. It's trisheastland@yahoo.com. So, and I'd be happy to do that for you. All right. I am going to also do what I normally do, ladies, and that is record this session. Okay. All right. We are recording right now. Now, we know what we always do at the very beginning. We're going to go through our ABCs, 1, 2, 3. So we start off with an A, and I'm kind of bummed that I don't have, anybody to cheat for me. So we're going to have Haley, as I have asked her to do that. She's my Geno tool. So here we go. A, ascension, beginning of the church. C, cripple cured. D, disciples detained. E, each lied, each died. F, faithful, 7 chosen. G, gospel preached by Stephen. ABC of G. H, here is water. I, in Damascus. J, Joppa vision. K, kingdom includes Gentiles. JKL, liberated Peter. M, missionary journey number 1. MN, N always gets me. Haley?
Not God's, but
oh yes, not God's but men. N-O, that gets me too, but don't tell me yet. O is old law, not binding. O, P, Paul called to Macedonia. Q, questions answered. Q, R, remains in Corinth for 18 months. Okay. S, stayed in Ephesus 3 years. ST, Tarsus, Troas on Sunday. T, ABC, okay, that's T, U, I cannot remember that one. Give me a hint.
uprising.
Oh yeah, uprising in Jerusalem. U, V, valiant defense by Paul. U, V, W is this one, chapter 23, wanted Paul dead. And then chapter 24, excuse of Felix. Phew. Okay, pretty soon we're going to have all of those done plus 2 more. So, since there's only 26 letters in the alphabet and there are 28 chapters. Okay, so let's experience Acts today. Lesson 18, chapters 23 and 24. Wanted Paul dead. Before we get into chapter 23, I want to go back to 22, chapter 22. If you got your Bibles with you, go down to chapter 22 and go to the last verse in that chapter. That's verse 30. It's been a while since we studied this. So I want to go back there and remind you where we are in this chapter. Okay, verse 30. The commander wanted to find out exactly why Paul was being accused by the Jews. So the next day, he released him and ordered the chief priests and all the members of the Sanhedrin to assemble. Then he brought Paul and had him stand before them. Okay, so this is the next day. This is the day after the riot in the temple in Jerusalem. It was the day after the Roman commander had arrested this man and put him in chains only to find out that he is a Roman citizen. So, in fact, he was a prisoner who didn't even have any charges against him yet. So today, this commander has two problems. Number one, how is he going to account to his superiors for the disturbance of the peace the day before at the temple? And two, he needs to find out what exactly it is that the Jews are accusing Paul of. So, this day begins with him ordering the chief priests and all the members of the Sanhedrin to assemble. And he, the commander, probably with some of his soldiers, brought Paul to them. All right, so let's look. This is just an artist's concept of what the assembly might have looked like. Now, not necessarily this particular event, but it's just one of the pictures I found on the internet that could have been the way the Sanhedrin met. All right, your question number one, how did Paul begin his testimony before the Sanhedrin? He says, verse 1, Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." Now, normally, someone would probably acknowledge and compliment the leader of the assembly, but Paul did not do that. And he was immediately bold and honest with this pronouncement, and the council took it as being arrogant and almost blasphemous, because in their minds, no one could make a statement like this. So, your question number two, what did the high priest do, and what was Paul's response? Verse number 2, at this the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck." Those who were standing near Paul said, "How dare you insult God's high priest?" But Paul replied, "Brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest. For it is written, 'Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people.'" And he's quoting here from Exodus 22, verse 28. Okay, so Ananias commanded that he be struck on the mouth. Ananias was a high priest at this time, and he was known to be violent, haughty, gluttonous, and rapacious. I had to look up rapacious, and it means like over the top greedy. And Paul's response, he called him a whitewashed wall. Now, this is a metaphor for a hypocrite. You know, you have something on a wall that is insulting, it's bad, so you get white paint and you paint the wall, you whitewash it, you cover something up that looks unsightly or ugly. And so this is a good comparison to someone like Ananias, who wanted people to think he was good, but he wasn't. Everybody could actually see that he wasn't. Now, Paul knew the law really well. He studied under Gamaliel. He knew about the rights of the accused in Leviticus 19. In the King James Version, chapter 19, verse 35 in Leviticus says, "Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment." And also, if you want to look in John chapter 7, verse 51, it also talks about laws. Now, Paul had not, and Paul hadn't even been convicted yet, but he was being struck, and plus the fact that he was a Roman citizen. Now, this brings up something interesting. We don't exactly know where the commander was at this time. We don't know if he was in the room with the Sanhedrin or if he was listening from somewhere else, because that would not have gone over well with the commander, with them striking a Roman citizen that had not been accused. I mean, that not only had not, it had not been convicted. So, also, something about Ananias that I did not know. Now, this is not the same Ananias that we find during Jesus' day, that where Jesus, who was in the Sanhedrin when Jesus' trial went on. But this Ananias was years and years later, like 20, 25 years later, he had been sent to Rome to be tried for violence. But in Rome, he was acquitted by Claudius, who was the emperor. Now he's back in Jerusalem. And the current high priest, who should have been the leader of this assembly of the Sanhedrin, had been assassinated. And once a high priest, always a high priest, Ananias was the highest ranking priest there at the Sanhedrin. And so he took that leadership position. So Paul may have known this, I don't know, or he could have been speaking sarcastically, considering the actions of the man in verse 5 when he said he did not realize he was the high priest. So, and then later, whenever he quoted Exodus 22:28, this does show that he had respect for the law and respect for the office, but not necessarily respect for the man. So here we have. Now, Paul speaks 3 times. First, he makes this pronouncement that he's fulfilled his duty to God in all good conscience to this day. Then he calls Ananias a hypocrite and a lawbreaker. All right, now we go to verse 6. And I want to say one thing too. The Sanhedrin had several apostles in front of them at some point. You remember in Acts 4 and 5, they had Peter and John in front of them who spoke the gospel to them. And then in Acts 6, they had Stephen before them who definitely spoke the gospel then as well. But their minds were just too far from God. And here, Paul could tell that their minds were already too far from God. So Paul changes the subject here. Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, "My brothers, I am a Pharisee, descended from Pharisees. I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and that there are neither angels nor spirits. But the Pharisees believe all these things. There was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. "We find nothing wrong with this man," they said. "What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Now, Paul makes this he speaks 4 times, makes pronouncements, calls Ananias a hypocrite and a lawbreaker. Then he apologizes because he had great respect for the office, just not the man who held this office. And then the 4th time, he gives the reason he is on trial, the hope of the resurrection of the dead. And this is the last thing he's going to say during this assembly that is written. All right, now remember, I want you to go to Mark chapter 13 and verse 11. Mark chapter 13, verse 11. All right, what did Jesus say about being on trial. Verse 11, whenever you are arrested and brought to trial, do not worry beforehand about what to say. Just say whatever is given you at the time, for it is not you speaking, but the Holy Spirit. Okay, so it's probable that the Holy Spirit guided Paul into doing this and saying this. So, your question number 3 was, what did Paul know about the Sadducees and Pharisees that he could use to distract them, and how did it work? So, they disagreed about the resurrection, about angels, and about spirits. And it worked quite well, except that they were, about to kill him. So, but the commander, like I said, I don't know where he was at the time, but he had. It does say he ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and take him back to the barracks, bring him into the barracks. So I don't know if he could just hear what was going on and thought, we got to go down and get him. He evidently was up, because he tells his troops to go down and get him. And they took him out. They took him away by force. So, and that sort of brings up something interesting that took me a really long time to figure out, and not that I never did figure it out. Where did they assemble? Where were they meeting? Where was this commander? So, anyway, I found 4 different places that they could have been. And it said that the Sanhedrin did meet in the temple area. Some said on the north side, which is, see where this arrow is, right here. And then some places said it was on the south side, in the chamber of hewn stone. But evidently, some people think the chamber of the hewn stone is on the south side, and some think it was on the north side. So, and just to give you an idea of where the north side is, the barracks is back over here. So, in fact, let's go to a picture of the barracks. All right, this is in this. Some people thought it was the southeast part of the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount included this whole part. This was the temple area right here, like the court of the women was right here. And then all this around here, remember, is the court of the Gentiles. So some people think that the Sanhedrin met in the southeast perimeter. Here is the barracks where the commander told them to take Paul back. So, but Josephus actually says that at this point in history, the Sanhedrin was meeting somewhere in Jerusalem. And before Rome took over, they were meeting up here in the temple. But I couldn't figure out, as I was studying, when exactly they stopped meeting in the temple, and they might have started meeting down here. I really don't know. But you can study that on your own and decide for yourself, because I just decided I'd spent too much time on that. Okay, so what did God do that let Paul know that everything happening was according to his plan? All right, verse 11. The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." All right, you remember, this is not the only vision Paul's had. He even, in chapter 22, verse 17, he had told the mob, remember in the temple right before the mob grabbed him, he told the mob that the Lord had visited him, told him, in the vision, he told him to leave Jerusalem. Now, this was years before, whenever he had first been converted, and he went there after his conversion. And he had this vision where God told him to leave Jerusalem at a certain point. And then in chapter 18, 9 and 10, God told him not to be afraid, but to go on speaking. And this was in Corinth, you remember. But in here, he tells him to take courage. And he talks about testifying in Rome. Now, I don't know if you remember, but in chapter 19, we talked about, Paul was talking about his plan, what he wanted to do. He wanted to go through Macedonia, wanted to go back to Jerusalem, and then he wanted to go on to Rome. And that looks like what is happening now. Paul, I'm sure in the next weeks, months, years even, Paul will think back on this vision and he will take courage. So, your question number 4, what plot developed among the Jews? All right, verse 12. The next morning, some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. All right. Now, there were 40 men. They were Jews, but we don't know who they were. We don't know if some of them were from the Sanhedrin. We don't know who they were, except that they were Jews. And there were 40 of them. Well, more than 40 of them. All right. Verse 14, they went to the chief priests and elders. This is the plot. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, we have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander. So now they want the chief priests and elders to involve the Sanhedrin. All right. Petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. So they wanted they're getting this plot ready. We are ready to kill him before he gets here. All right, so this involves this bringing Paul to this meeting involves the commander taking Paul out of the barracks and taking him to the meeting place. Now, let's look at this again. Here's the barracks. You know, he's going to take them out, and he would either take them here or take him around here, or take him probably outside and come around this way to get into the Sanhedrin up these stairs and in here. Or they could go around this direction, or they would come out of the barracks and here and go someplace in Jerusalem, wherever they were meeting. So, and they would also have Roman soldiers with them. So we're talking about, I mean, are we talking about sedition? I don't know, but these 40 men evidently were planning to overpower Roman soldiers so they could get at Paul and kill him. I don't think this would look good for the commander if he lost a prisoner this way. So, all right, so who or what foiled their plot? And we're going to see God's plan just in every part of this, of what we're going to see next. All right, now remember, God promised Paul that he was going to testify in Rome. He just didn't say how he was going to get there. So let's look and see God's plan. First, God's going to get Paul to Rome. And second, he's going to get Paul out of harm's way first. All right, verse 16. But when the son of Paul's sister heard this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Okay, so he's going to use Paul's family to get him out of harm's way. Interesting, this is Paul's sister's son, which would be his nephew. This is the first time we've heard of Paul having any family in Jerusalem. And it seems that they also had visiting privileges there at the fortress, or the barracks, as they called it. And he tells Paul about this plot. Now, we don't know how he knew about this plot. That's a Hollywood thing. We just have to make something up. But he did find out about it, and he was able to go tell Paul about it. So verse 17, then Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him. So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you. I'm sure that's how a centurion would say it to his commander. Anyway, the commander took the young man by the hand and drew him aside and asked, what is it you want to tell me? So the fact that he took him by the hand indicates to me that he may be younger, maybe 10 or 11, maybe 12. And I didn't read this anywhere, but it makes me wonder if this commander had children of his own and knew how to talk to children to get them to be at ease and tell him things that they needed to tell him. So he said, some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request. The commander dismissed the young man with this warning: don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me. Okay, so God also uses the commander. The commander now has 3 options. Let's see where we are here. All right, he has 3 options. First option, just let it happen to relieve himself of this problem. That's not really going to work, because Roman officials could not afford to lose prisoners. They tended to die if they did that. So, and really, many Roman officials were of high quality. They respected human rights, and Roman law. And just think about Cornelius. He was a centurion. He was a good man. So not all commanders and centurions were bad people. Not all Roman soldiers were bad. They upheld the law. Option number 2, refuse the request of the Sanhedrin. That was an option. But we read several times that the people, like the Roman officials, they did not want to lose favor with the Jews. The commander, he lived in Jerusalem, and he was the commander over the temple and Jerusalem. He couldn't afford to lose favor with them. And who knows, another riot might happen, and he couldn't afford that either. Third option, move the prisoner before his consent is given. So, option number 3 it is. So, question number 6, what did the commander do with the information? Okay, verse 22. The commander dismissed 23. Then he called 2 of his centurions, 2. Now, a centurion is over 100 men. He called 2 of them and ordered them, get a detachment of 200 soldiers, 200 spearmen, 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix. This is a huge entourage for this one prisoner. Plus, they're giving Paul horses. Not just one horse, more than one, for this trip. All right, so he acts quickly to have safe passage for Paul to Caesarea. All right, Caesarea is the headquarters of Governor Felix. Well, I'm going to show you a few things about Caesarea in just a minute. All right, but first, let's go over the letter that he sends. The commander sends a letter. He wrote a letter, verse 25, Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency, Governor Felix. Greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him. All right, so let's look at this letter. The commander's name is Claudius Lysias. Now, Claudius, remember, Claudius has two problems. Claudius Lysias is the commander. He has two problems. First problem was, how does he account for the disturbance of the peace in Jerusalem? Well, he says this man was seized by the Jews. They were about to kill him. I came with my troops. I rescued him because I found out he was a Roman citizen. So, he rescued Paul upon discovering he was a Roman citizen. He's a hero. I'm telling you, he's smart. All right, now, question number 2. Problem number 2. What accusations do the Jews have against this man? Well, he knows it has something to do with their law. He didn't think it had anything to do with death or imprisonment. There was this plot, so he's just decided to pass this problem off to Felix. How handy. No wonder he's commander. He should be promoted. He's so smart. Okay, so he took care of both his problems and just gave him to Felix. Verse 31. So the soldiers carrying out their orders took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. All right, here we have the journey from Jerusalem to Caesarea. Okay, here's Jerusalem down here. They're going up here to Caesarea, and this was how they were going. You can see they even had to go over some mountains, but they left at night, and they went all night. Now, it is about 37 miles from Jerusalem up to Antipatris. So they get there. So verse 32, the next day, they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. So only the horsemen went with him. Everybody else comes back. But there were still 200 horsemen. And it is about 26 miles from Antipatris to Caesarea. So they rode all day to get to Caesarea. The rest of the army had turned back to go back to Jerusalem, no doubt with instructions to be on the lookout for a Jewish mob. So, and then the cavalry arrives in Caesarea. And they go to Herod's palace, which is right here, probably from this entrance to the city of Jerusalem, and go down this street and go down to Herod's palace. Okay, when the cavalry arrived at Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. Okay, so their destination, as I said, was Herod's palace. And imagine, late in the day, you've got this huge cavalry coming in, arriving in the city, and right in the middle of them, there's this prisoner, Paul. I don't even know if he could be seen, but he might could be seen. Imagine disciples witnessing him coming in there. Now, Agabus, they knew Agabus. They knew about the prophecy that Agabus had prophesied about Paul, that he would be chained, that he would be imprisoned. Now, he is not chained here. He's a Roman soldier, not convicted yet, but he is imprisoned. And so, also, imagine what might have been going on in Paul's mind as he entered Caesarea. He's got an escort fit for a king, really. And, could he be thinking of a passage maybe in Psalms? Go to Psalms 34, verse 7. The angel of the Lord encamps about those who fear him, and he delivers them. So God has delivered Paul out of the hands of the Jews. Verse 34. The governor read the letter and asked from what province he was from. Let me show you a little bit about Caesarea. I had forgotten I had these pictures. Okay, Mom took this picture. Mom has been over there, and I just wanted to show you some pictures in Caesarea. I believe this was taken in 1999, but this is ruins of the marketplace in Caesarea. This is actually an inscription honoring Pilate in AD 30. This is a first artifact found proving that Pilate was governor around the time of Christ. All right, here is an inscription on the floor of the tax office, and it's from Romans 13:7. I thought, let's just go ahead and read what that says. Romans 13:7. It's just a little trivia. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Interesting. All right, and then these are some ancient port ruins in Caesarea. It's possible that the Apostle Paul even went down those steps. That's how old and ancient this area is. Okay, now let's see about these charges presented to Felix. The governor, verse 34, read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning he was from Cilicia, which evidently Felix had jurisdiction over Cilicia, he said, I will hear your case when your accusers get here. Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. And we've already looked at Herod's palace. Okay. Now, we are in chapter 24. For your question number 7, what happened 5 days later? All right, the Jews arrive from Jerusalem. First verse, 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. Now, it took them 5 days. So travel time is part of that. And getting a message back may have taken some time too. They had to have some time to get ready and everybody get over there. Also, the Sanhedrin may have needed time to prepare a case, because now it wasn't just going to be them meeting with Paul. They were going to be in front of a Roman governor. So they had to have some kind of charge. You have to have a charge. So, and they engaged a lawyer as well. They may have realized that, we may be in a little bit of difficulty here with the Romans. So they engaged this eloquent spokesman to present their case before the governor. And he would have needed some time to prepare as well. Okay, so their case begins pretty diplomatically. Let's read what Tertullus has to say. Verse 2. When Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix. We've enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this, but with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, did Felix look like he was weary of hearing this? I don't know. Interesting. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. Verse 5. We have found this man to be a troublemaker. All right. This is a a personal charge against his person. He's a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He's a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. Now, okay, about the riot thing, I think it would be interesting to like think about what's going on with Felix, because in the letter that Claudius Lysias sent, did he say that Paul started this riot or the Jews started the riot? So it was the Jews that wanted to tear Paul apart. And then the Nazarene sect. Your question number 9 is what references were made in chapter 24, verse 5, verse 14, and verse 21. The answer to that is the Nazarene sect and the Way. All right, so they were saying that he was a ringleader of the Nazarene sect, implying an illegal action. But this did not seem to make much of an impression on Felix. And then, verse 6, and even tried to desecrate the temple. So this was doctrinal. So we seized him, and we would have judged him according to our law. But the commander Lysias came and took him from us with much violence, ordering his accusers to come before you. I'm thinking that the violence had already started, since that's why Lysias sent his troops to get him. And they probably had to be a bit violent to get Paul away from them. Notice also in verse 6, the lawyer includes himself in the actions. We seized him, which places himself at the scene. We have judged him according to our law, which shows him to be a Jew. He took him from us. He's emotionally involved, which really a lawyer should not be emotionally involved with his case. I don't know if it just doesn't seem that Felix was that impressed with what he said. He doesn't say anything. But going on to verse 8, by examining him yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about all these charges we are bringing against him. The other Jews joined in this accusation, asserting that these things were true. So, but they've greatly underestimated Paul. Paul's a smart guy. Plus, he has God on his side. Verse 10, when the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, let's go on and see Paul's defense. Paul replied, I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere else in the city. And they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the God of our fathers as a follower of the Way, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets. And I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. Okay, so he verified the evidence. He admits some facts, that he's a follower of the Way, and he agrees with the law and the prophets. Now remember, do you remember that there was a division that caused this riot between the Sadducees and the Pharisees? Because the Sadducees, they don't believe in the resurrection. They don't believe in angels. They don't believe in spirits. They also, from what I understand, only believe in the Torah. The prophets, they really, they read the prophets, but I just don't know how much they, how much faith they put in that. So he agrees with the law and the prophets, and he's saying that he believes them and that all these men believe it. So it may be that more Sadducees had come down than Pharisees, because the Pharisees were wanting to acquit Paul. And he has the same hope in God. I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, verse 15, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. The Sadducees did not believe in a resurrection. But he's saying he does believe in the resurrection, and he's telling Felix that they believe that there's a resurrection. I can just almost picture all these men thinking, we don't believe that, and getting kind of angry. Verse 16, so I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. The very first of chapter 23, we see him in the Sanhedrin telling them his conscience is clear with God and man. All right, verse 17. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. I was ceremonially unclean when they found me in the temple courts doing that. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. So he recounts this event in the temple and suggests that there are witnesses that are absent. Or these who are here should state what crime they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Unless it was this one thing, I shouted as I stood in their presence, it is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial for you today. So, the statement about the resurrection. Verse 22, then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, adjourned the proceedings. He did not allow Tertullus, the lawyer, to redress this, to say anything further. No more accusations were made. There were no clarifications of charges. Felix just adjourns the proceedings. When Lysias, the commander, comes, he said, I will decide your case. So he announces to Paul this decision. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom and permit his friends to take care of his needs. So, wait till Claudius Lysias comes. Now, he gave concessions to the Jews. He kept Paul under arrest, and he said that Paul can have his friends take care of him, his needs. All right, several days later, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was a Jewess. He sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Christ Jesus. Now, Drusilla, she is a descendant of several Herods. Okay, she's in the family of the Herods. Her great-grandfather had all the babies under 2 killed in Bethlehem. Her great-uncle beheaded John the Baptist, and her father killed the Apostle James. So, verse 25. As Paul talked about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, that's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. So, at the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe. So he sent for him frequently and talked with him. Paul had, as we see, verse 27, for 2 years had passed. 2 years had passed. He had 2 years talking to Felix. And it doesn't really say that Felix was ever converted, but he did hear the gospel. And let's just finish out the chapter. When 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. But because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. Interesting to note that, he had said up in verse 22, when Lysias the commander comes, it's never recorded in Acts that Claudius Lysias, ever came. It's never recorded that Felix ever sent for him. So Paul was in there for 2 years, just waiting. And, Gary just got finished with, his sermon right now is about the wilderness and waiting. Paul waited. And, but God was with him. And I'm sure during those 2 years, he was remembering his vision to take courage. Thank you for being with me today. And I hope you enjoyed that. And we will see you next time.